What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having an amazing day. Now today I'm back on r/ProRevenge with two phenomenal stories, starting with this one in which a truly awful boss gets justice in a genius way after 20 years. Before we get into this one, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. Go ahead, hit the button on whatever platform you're on. It is completely free and it helps me out massively, so you never miss one of these stories in the future. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss a story just like this one. Let's get straight into it. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my trashy manager. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I'd excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. If you guys remember Sony Ericssons, which by the way I believe was my first ever phone, drop me a comment down below. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make even the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat, perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared. Yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area as I was and had gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got MS Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I'd been quite angry with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of mine and several others' existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying wrong number, I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. Now, this is where I could potentially be the jerk here. I also volunteered his manager's number in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade, banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he'd been taking loans in everyone's names, his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200,000 US. That is the equivalent in where OP is from, but they say it's an absolute trash load of money. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but nobody could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later, and I haven't heard from him since. Well, apart from the fact that is obviously phenomenal revenge and a great ending to this story, the main question that I have is how was nobody able to find this guy for years and years and years? That's just insane. For example, if I'm a bank and I've lent a lot of money to an individual and they haven't even bothered to try and repay any of it, I am sending out a SWAT team. I'm sending out my best people. I'm employing the best company I possibly can to find him and make him pay that money back. Legally, of course, but you know what I mean. Why has nobody found this person before? Why has he been allowed to, as OP says, walk on water and just think that he's untouchable because so far he has been? I think that's a letdown in the system. Again, not entirely sure which country this takes place in, but that is the main thing that sticks out to me. Now, moving on to the revenge, from OP's point, phenomenal stuff. I mean, really, really good. I guess in many ways, it's fortunate after all these years that you were getting all these calls. I mean, it's so lucky that in a roundabout way, that SIM card belonged to the person it belonged to. It must have been very annoying for that period of time, but knowing then finally whose SIM it actually was, whose number it was, you must have just been like, oh my goodness me. I hit the jackpot the entire time and I never knew it. So yeah, great revenge from OP. But again, the main thing that sticks out to me is just the clear structural failure of whatever country this takes place in to not track this guy down. Now for our second story of revenge. And if you thought the first one was satisfying, well, this one is equally so and potentially even more. We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord and it was glorious. Quote, gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. Okay, that is a definition of gazumping, and having not been in that position, I can imagine it is unbelievably frustrating. Comment down below, have you ever been gazumped? I don't think it's allowed, but goodness me, if it happens to you, it must be awful. This happened 15 years ago, and it is one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stinky drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they'd saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she'd helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her. And so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each extremely wealthy in their own rights. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they'd have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house would be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently, and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find another affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't need the money. It's pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So, while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. First of all, it has to be uncluttered. So we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, and borrowed ornaments and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt much smaller. Secondly, the smell was very important. So my friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove, and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smells like all the neighborhood cats have been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Thirdly, the neighborhood is obviously super important. So we obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in the front yard of the neighbors across the road, with permission, of course. Secondly, we also started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and trashy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. And thirdly, we called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbour set up a barbecue in their front yard, and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. This is an amazing story. Can you just picture this in your minds, guys, right now? Just absolute carnage going on around these houses. Potential owners looking at the house being like, oh my goodness me, what have I just walked into? It actually reminds me of that scene from Fallout, if any of you guys have seen it, where the woman for the first time goes above land and just sees what has happened. And some of the creatures, they're huge, just the landscape is completely decimated. That's kind of what I'm picturing right now that this neighborhood has become. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with somebody leaving the party. He asked if they were there often and was told every couple of weeks or so. They have an after party morning, and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So, my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greedy idiots wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So, when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict antique gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. Tell you what, I think I actually prefer that story to the first one, if that's even possible. But as I said, just the image that I had in my head there, just so good. A neighborhood just completely destroyed because people like your friends and were willing to do whatever they could to help them get the property they deserved at a good price. And obviously as well, it's good to see that there are anti-gazumping laws in whichever country this is. Wasn't 100% on that, but yeah, that is good to see. What's crazy is that somebody seeing this, you know, when they go to the open house and they see this, they were still willing to put in a bid. 30k over the original price that was offered by the old landlady to your friends, OP. Goodness me. Now, someone actually commented, where did this happen, out of curiosity? Any guesses down below before I reveal? Don't cheat. Pause the episode. Give me your thoughts. I'll give you some clues. Rugby club, football rugby club, barbecues, a lot of motorbikes, good people coming together to help out other people that are in need. That's right. If you said Australia, Sydney specifically, you were correct. Someone else also asked, just out of interest, how did you source rotten eggs so easily? And OP said, I wondered if someone would ask that. Well, 5 days before the open house, we cracked the eggs into a jar and left them in the sun. Needed a gas mask when we took the lid off. Phenomenal stuff. Comment down below, which revenge did you prefer out of those two? Both great, both quite different. Corporate versus, I guess, sort of just like IRL, neighbors coming together, being great lads. I'm going to go with story 2.